My name is Ray, and I am a 32-year-old software engineer. At 20, my parents abandoned me at a highway rest stop, calling me a burden. I slept in a ditch that night and vowed never to speak to them again. 12 years passed until last week when my sister's wedding invitation arrived with an unexpected note from my parents inside. The sight of their handwriting reopened wounds I thought had healed. Before continuing this story, let me know where you're watching from, and subscribe if you want to hear how I confronted the people who threw me away. I grew up in a middle-class suburb of Denver, Colorado. Our house was nothing special, just a standard 3-bedroom in a neighborhood where all the homes looked pretty much the same. But inside those walls, life was anything but standard. My father, Thomas, was a small business owner who ran a construction company. He had built it from the ground up and took immense pride in his work. That pride, however, came with a volatile temper that could be triggered by the smallest things. One minute he would be helping me with homework, and the next, he would be shouting about a pencil I had left on the dining room table. His mood swings were as unpredictable as Colorado weather in spring. My mother, Sandra, was what some might call appearance-obsessed. Everything had to look perfect, especially to outsiders. She spent hours each day on her makeup and outfit choices. Our home was always immaculate when guests were expected, but behind closed doors, she was emotionally distant. I can count on one hand the number of times she hugged me after I turned 10. Physical affection was replaced with criticism about my posture, my clothes, or my haircut. Then there was my sister Amber, 4 years younger than me. She was the golden child from the moment she was born. Where I struggled academically despite being reasonably intelligent, Amber breezed through school with straight A's. Where I was awkward and gangly, she was graceful and athletic. Every achievement of hers was celebrated while mine were acknowledged with a nod at best. What nobody knew at the time was that I had undiagnosed ADHD. I could hyper-focus on things that interested me, like computer programming, but struggled immensely with subjects that didn't engage me. My report cards were a patchwork of A's in computer science and D's in subjects like history and literature. When I discovered programming in middle school, it was like finding a language I had always known but never spoken. The logic of it made sense to me in a way few things did. I would stay up late coding small games and applications, teaching myself languages from books I checked out from the library. What a waste of time, my father would say, walking past my room at midnight to find me still at the computer. You think anybody makes money doing that? Focus on real skills. My mother would chime in during breakfast. The Wilson boy is going pre-med. The Thompson's daughter just got accepted to an engineering program, and you want to play with computers all day. Around the time I turned 16, things started to change at home. My father's business began struggling. The housing market had slowed down, and competition from larger companies was eating into his profits. The financial strain showed in everything from fewer family dinners out to heated arguments between my parents late at night when they thought we were asleep. As the financial situation worsened, I became an increasingly convenient target for their frustrations. My college fund, which had been modest to begin with, was the first thing to go. What had once been, "We will help you through college," became, "You need to find scholarships or loans." During my senior year of high school, I managed to secure a partial scholarship to the state university, but it covered less than half the costs. I took on multiple part-time jobs, stocking shelves at a grocery store on weekends, delivering pizzas 3 nights a week, and working at the campus computer lab between classes. Even with all that, I was barely making ends meet. My mother's comparisons to cousins and neighbors intensified. "Your cousin Jake got a full ride to University of Colorado. I just don't understand why you couldn't apply yourself the same way." The fact that Jake had been a star quarterback while I had spent my high school years hunched over a keyboard seemed irrelevant to her. My father's verbal abuse escalated, especially when he had been drinking, which was happening more frequently as his business troubles mounted. "You know what your problem is? You've never had to really struggle. Maybe if life wasn't so easy for you, you'd develop some backbone." The irony of this statement while I was working nearly 40 hours a week on top of a full course load was not lost on me, but pointing this out would only make things worse. Depression and anxiety took hold during my first year of college. My grades slipped. I missed classes. The scholarship I had worked so hard for required maintaining a 3.5 GPA, and by the end of my second semester, I had dropped to a 2.8. The scholarship was gone, and with it, any chance of continuing without taking on massive debt. A family meeting was called. I sat at our dining room table, while my parents stood over me, my sister watching uncomfortably from the doorway. "You are the problem," my father said, jabbing his finger at me. "We've given you every opportunity, and this is how you repay us? By failing?" I tried to explain about the working hours, the stress, the undiagnosed learning issues I was just beginning to understand. I suggested changing majors to something more affordable at the community college, perhaps an associate degree in web development that would get me working sooner. "So now you want to throw away a university education for some 2-bit technical degree?" my mother said. "That's just giving up." There was no winning. Their expectations were clear: succeed on their terms or be labeled a failure. Alternative paths were not acceptable options. Amber would occasionally give me sympathetic looks during these confrontations, but she never spoke up. I couldn't blame her. To align with me meant potentially becoming a target herself. The few times I tried to stand up for myself were met with escalation. "As long as you live under this roof, you'll do as we say," my father would thunder. "If you don't like it, there's the door." It was an empty threat until it wasn't. The final argument came after I suggested taking a semester off to work full-time and save money. My father's face turned a deep red as he suggested, "I figure life out on my own if I was going to make such irresponsible decisions." I had no idea then just how literally he meant those words. My 20th birthday passed without celebration. Instead of cake, I got a lecture about my future prospects. Instead of presents, I received reminders about upcoming tuition payments. It was just another day in a week of escalating tensions. 3 days after my birthday, I lost my campus job when budget cuts eliminated several student positions. The loss of that income, while not huge, was enough to throw my carefully balanced finances into chaos. I knew I needed to talk to my parents about the tuition payment due in 2 weeks. I chose a Sunday evening when my father seemed to be in a relatively good mood. He had spent the day working on his old Mustang in the garage, which usually put him in better spirits. I approached cautiously, rehearsing what I would say. "Dad, I need to talk to you about tuition for next semester." His hands froze on the bills he was sorting at the kitchen table. "What about it?" "I lost my campus job. Budget cuts. I've already applied for other positions, but there's going to be a gap, and I'm not sure I can make the payment deadline." The explosion was immediate. "Are you kidding me right now? After everything we've done? After all the sacrifices we've made?" My mother rushed in from the living room, drawn by the shouting. "What's happening?" "Your son wants more money," my father spat. "Apparently working and studying like the rest of us is too hard for him." "That's not what I said," I tried to explain. "I just need help with timing. Once I find another job." "If you were any good at your jobs, you wouldn't keep losing them," my mother cut in, her voice trembling with what seemed like genuine emotion. "Do you know what this is doing to our family? Your father works 60 hours a week. We haven't had a vacation in 3 years. Amber needs braces, but we've had to put that off. You're destroying this family with your irresponsibility." I stood there, absorbing blow after verbal blow, wondering how asking for help with timing on a tuition payment had escalated to me being accused of destroying the family. The next morning, my mother announced we would be taking a family trip that weekend to visit my grandfather in Grand Junction, about 4 hours away. It was surprising we rarely visited him, and certainly not on short notice. "It will be good for us all to get away for a day," she said, not quite meeting my eyes. "Clear our heads." I felt a spark of hope. Maybe this was an olive branch. Maybe getting away from the house would give us a chance to talk things through calmly, to find a solution that worked for everyone. That Saturday morning, we loaded into the family SUV. The atmosphere was tense, but I was determined to make the best of it. I brought up neutral topics, a movie I had seen, a tech article I had read, but my attempts at small talk were met with one-word answers or silence. We had been driving for about an hour when my father pulled into a rest stop. It was one of those larger ones with vending machines, bathrooms, and picnic tables, located just off the highway in a particularly desolate stretch between towns. "I need to use the bathroom," my father announced. "Anyone else?" I said I would go too. My mother and Amber stayed in the car. "We'll wait here," my mother said, staring straight ahead. The men's room was empty. My father used the urinal while I took a stall. I heard him finish and leave without washing his hands. I took my time, splashing water on my face, trying to gather my thoughts for another attempt at conversation when we got back on the road. When I walked out of the bathroom, the parking lot was nearly empty. Our car was gone. My backpack sat alone on a bench near where we had parked. My first thought was ridiculous. They had moved the car to a different spot to prank me. But a quick scan of the small lot showed they were truly gone. My phone buzzed in my pocket. A text from my father. "Time to grow up and stop being a burden." I called him immediately, straight to voicemail. I called my mother, same result. I called Amber, heart pounding. "Hello?" Her voice was small, uncertain. "Amber, where are you guys? Why did you leave?" I don't know. Mom and Dad said not to talk to you. They said you needed to learn responsibility. They left me at a rest stop 70 miles from home. How am I supposed to get back? I don't know. I have to go. They're watching me." She hung up. I checked the bus schedules on my phone. The nearest town with service was 20 miles away, and the last bus had already departed. No service until morning. Panic rising, I approached a family getting out of their minivan. "Excuse me, I'm sorry to bother you, but I'm stranded. My family left without me. Is there any chance you're heading toward Denver?" The father pulled his children closer and shook his head. "Sorry, man. We're going the other way." His expression made it clear he thought I was up to something. I couldn't blame him. A disheveled 20-year-old claiming his family abandoned him did sound like the setup for a robbery, or worse. I tried a few more groups with similar results. As the afternoon wore on, the traffic at the rest stop thinned out. By 6 o'clock, the sun was beginning to set, and the reality of my situation became impossible to ignore. My family had deliberately driven me to a remote location and left me there. They had planned this, the surprise trip, the specific rest stop, the backpack already removed from the car. This wasn't a heat-of-the-moment decision. It was premeditated abandonment. As this realization sank in, my chest tightened. My breathing became shallow and rapid. Black spots danced at the edges of my vision, a panic attack taking hold. I sat on the curb, head between my knees, forcing myself to take deep breaths until the dizziness passed. When I had calmed down enough, I made one more call to my sister. "Please, Amber, tell them to come back for me." "I can't, Ray. They've made up their minds. Dad says you need to learn what the real world is like." Did you know? Did you know they were planning this?" The pause before she answered told me everything. I didn't know exactly what they were going to do, but she had known something. My own sister had sat silently while our parents plotted to abandon me in the middle of nowhere. "I have to go," she said quickly. "Someone's coming." The line went dead, and with it, my last hope that this was all some terrible mistake that would soon be corrected. Night was falling, and I was truly alone. As darkness fell completely, the temperature dropped rapidly. Colorado nights can be cold, even in summer, and I was wearing only jeans and a light t-shirt. The rest stop lights created pools of yellow illumination surrounded by deep shadows, giving the whole place an eerie, abandoned feel. The bathroom provided temporary shelter, but a state trooper stopped by around 10 o'clock and told me I couldn't stay there overnight. He seemed suspicious of my story. "Your parents just left you here? Why would they do that?" I had no answer that wouldn't sound pathetic. "We had a disagreement about school." "You got ID? Any warrants I should know about?" After checking my driver's license and running my name, he seemed slightly less suspicious but still unwilling to help. "Look, I can't give you a ride. It's against policy. There's a town about 7 miles east if you start walking now." With that less than helpful advice, he left me standing in the parking lot. The prospect of walking along a highway at night seemed even more dangerous than staying put. I explored the perimeter of the rest area, and found a drainage ditch behind the main building. It offered some protection from the wind, at least. I huddled there, using my backpack as a pillow, shivering as the temperature continued to drop. Sleep came in brief, uncomfortable intervals, interrupted by passing trucks on the highway and the constant cold that seemed to seep into my bones. Sometime before dawn, I must have fallen into a deeper sleep because I woke to the sound of footsteps nearby. Daylight was just breaking, casting a gray light over the rest area. "You okay down there, son?" The voice belonged to a heavy-set man in his 50s, wearing a flannel shirt and trucker's cap. I scrambled to my feet, stiff and sore from the night on the hard ground. "Yes, sir. I'm fine." He didn't look convinced. "You don't look fine. You look like you spent the night in a ditch." That's actually exactly what happened. His name was Bill, and he was a long-haul trucker on his way to Wyoming. After hearing a condensed version of my story, he offered me a ride. "I'm not going all the way to Denver, but I can get you closer. Got a drop-off about 50 miles from here." In the warmth of his truck cab, eating a breakfast sandwich he insisted on buying me at the next truck stop, Bill shared his own story of family estrangement. "My old man was a mean drunk. Left home at 16 and never looked back. Built my own life, my own family. Sometimes the family you're born into isn't the family you end up with, you know?" He dropped me off in a small town I'd never heard of, still about 15 miles from home. He offered me $20, which I initially refused. "Take it," he insisted. "Pay it forward someday when you're back on your feet." The walk home took nearly 5 hours. My phone had died, and I had no way to charge it. I trudged through unfamiliar neighborhoods, following signs toward the general direction of Denver. By the time I reached our suburban street, the sun was high, and I was exhausted, hungry, and emotionally numb. As I approached our house, I noticed something off about the front door. It took a moment to register there was a new deadbolt installed. I tried my key in the original lock, but it wouldn't turn. The security keypad had been reset too. Mrs. Patterson from next door was watering her flowers, watching me with undisguised curiosity. I gave her an awkward wave, trying to appear normal while attempting to break into what had been my home less than 24 hours ago. "They left early this morning," she called over. Said something about visiting family. That's when I noticed the garbage bags. 3 black plastic bags were piled neatly by the side gate, clearly full of household items. On top was a white envelope with my name written in my mother's perfect handwriting. The note inside was brief. "Find your own path. Don't contact us again." I opened the bags there on the lawn, aware of Mrs. Patterson, and now Mr. Grayson across the street watching. The bags contained my clothes, some books, my laptop, and various personal items. My entire life, reduced to 3 garbage bags. With shaking hands, I pulled out my phone charger from one bag and plugged my dead phone into an outdoor outlet on the porch. After a few minutes, I had enough charge to make a call. Tyler had been my friend since middle school. His family had always been kind to me, even if we had drifted somewhat apart during college. "Tyler? It's Ray. I need help." The hardest part was explaining the situation. Each word felt like admitting a shameful failure. My own parents found me so worthless. They had literally thrown me away. Tyler's shock was evident even through the phone. "Are you serious? They just left you there? What the hell, man?" "I know it sounds crazy. I can barely believe it myself." "Where are you now?" "Outside my house." "Well, their house, I guess." "Stay there. I'm coming to get you." Tyler arrived 20 minutes later. By then, I had repacked the bags and was sitting on the curb, trying to ignore the stares from neighbors. Tyler helped me load my bags into his car, his expression a mix of anger and disbelief. "You can stay with us for a bit. I need to clear it with my parents, but they won't say no." His parents were less enthusiastic than Tyler had predicted. Mrs. Winters was sympathetic but concerned. "Of course you can stay, Ray, but just for a few days until you figure something out. We don't have much space, as you know." I spent that first night on their living room couch, using borrowed toiletries and wearing the same clothes I had worn for 2 days. The humiliation was complete when I had to ask Tyler for a clean pair of underwear. That night, I tried contacting my sister again, only to discover she had blocked my number. The final blow came in the form of an email from my mother. "This is for your own good. Become a man. Make something of yourself. Prove us wrong." In the winter's bathroom, I finally broke down. I sat on the closed toilet lid and cried silently, not wanting to wake the family that had taken me in. I cried for the loss of my family, for the shameful way I had been discarded, and for the uncertain future that stretched before me. Most of all, I cried for the naive 20-year-old who had still, despite everything, believed his parents wouldn't really hurt him like this. That belief was gone now, washed away with tears I couldn't afford to keep shedding. The Winters family let me stay for 2 uncomfortable weeks. I slept on their couch, kept my possessions neatly stacked in a corner of their living room, and tried to make myself as invisible as possible. Mrs. Winters would give me these tight smiles whenever she entered the room, clearly counting the days until I would be gone. Finding housing was my priority. With no credit history, no stable income, and no cosigner, most legitimate apartment complexes wouldn't touch me. I ended up answering an ad for a room in a shared house in one of Denver's less desirable neighborhoods. My new home was a converted attic space in a dilapidated Victorian divided into 6 makeshift bedrooms. My roommates were a rotating cast of characters: a night shift nurse who slept during the day, a guy who claimed to be a music producer but seemed to deal drugs on the side, and 3 community college students who partied most nights. I landed a job at a fast food restaurant, working double shifts whenever possible. The pay was barely enough to cover rent and basic necessities. I sold my textbooks, my laptop painful, given my interest in programming and other possessions to make ends meet. The only things I refused to sell were the few family photos I had grabbed. Despite everything, I couldn't let go of those tangible proofs that I had once been part of a family. About a month after being abandoned, I received a text from an unknown number. It was Amber, using a friend's phone. "Can we meet? Coffee shop on Hampton Ave tomorrow at 3? I was there by 2:30, nervous and hopeful. Amber arrived looking uncomfortable, constantly checking the door as if afraid our parents might walk in. "They told everyone. You chose to leave," she said, stirring her latte without drinking it. "Dad says you wanted independence and opportunities elsewhere. Mom cried at church about how you just up and left without saying goodbye." The unfairness of it hit me like a physical blow. They abandoned me at a rest stop 70 miles from home. They changed the locks and packed my stuff in garbage bags. Amber looked down. "I know. I was there. I'm sorry, Ray. I should have said something." "Why didn't you? You know how they are. Especially Dad. When he gets an idea in his head," she trailed off. "They're talking about using your college fund for a kitchen renovation." My college fund that supposedly didn't exist anymore. Just one more lie. "Are you okay? Do you need money?" she asked. I was barely surviving, but pride made me shake my head. "I'm fine. Got a job, a place to stay." "Mom checks your social media every day, you know, to see if you've posted anything about what really happened." I hadn't posted anything. What would I say? Homeless because my parents threw me away like trash? Amber left after promising to stay in touch, a promise I knew she wouldn't keep. Her loyalties were clear, and self-preservation would win out over sisterly concern. The following months were a blur of work and struggle. One particularly bad week, when my portion of the rent was due and my paycheck was delayed because of a processing error, I spent 2 nights sleeping on a bench in a park. I told myself it was just temporary, that things would get better, but in those dark hours before dawn, it was hard to believe. I swallowed my pride and applied for emergency financial aid and food stamps. Standing in the welfare office, surrounded by struggling families and elderly people on fixed incomes, I felt both shame and a strange sense of community. These were people society had failed in various ways, just as my family had failed me. My turning point came unexpectedly. Jordan, an assistant manager at the restaurant where I worked, noticed me studying a programming book during my breaks. "You into computers?" he asked one day. "Yeah, was studying computer science before I had to leave school." He nodded thoughtfully. "My brother's company needs someone to help with their website. It's nothing fancy, just updating content and fixing small issues. Interested?" That side gig led to a promotion at the restaurant to shift supervisor after Jordan put in a good word. The slightly better pay allowed me to rent a tiny studio apartment in a safer neighborhood. It was barely 200 square feet, with a kitchenette and bathroom, so small I had to step outside to change my mind, but it was mine. The furniture was salvaged from alleys and thrift stores, a futon that doubled as a bed, a wooden crate as a nightstand, a wobbly desk from a university surplus sale. But having my own space, with a door I could lock, felt like luxury after months of instability. Despite this improvement, depression and isolation remained constant companions. I worked, came home, slept, and repeated the cycle. Making friends was difficult when most social activities cost money I didn't have. Dating was out of the question. Who would want someone whose own parents had thrown him away? I started a small website business, using public library computers. My first real client paid $500 for a simple business site, more money than I had seen at once in months. I spent some of it on a refurbished laptop, investing in my future rather than immediate comfort. About 8 months after being abandoned, I had a chance encounter that shook me. I was working at the mall food court location of the restaurant when I spotted them, my parents, shopping bags in hand, laughing about something. They hadn't seen me. I ducked into the back storage area, heart racing, hands shaking. My manager found me there having a full-blown panic attack. "Take the rest of your shift off," she said, concern in her eyes. "Whatever's wrong, take care of yourself first." I couldn't explain to her or anyone what was wrong, that despite the months of building a new life, the sight of the people who had abandoned me could still reduce me to a trembling wreck. That incident made me realize how unhealed my trauma remained. I had been so focused on physical survival that I hadn't addressed the emotional devastation. Trust became a foreign concept. I kept people at arm's length, afraid to rely on anyone. The friendships I did form remained superficial. I never told anyone the full story of how I ended up alone. Holidays were the hardest. Working through Thanksgiving and Christmas became my tradition, volunteering for shifts others wanted off. Better to stay busy than sit alone in my tiny apartment while social media filled with family celebrations. One night, scrolling through Facebook, I saw photos from Amber's college graduation. My parents beamed proudly beside her, my father's arm around her shoulders. The caption read, "So proud of our amazing daughter. Off to grad school next fall." I stared at those photos for hours. Not because I begrudged Amber her success, but because the smiling people in those pictures were strangers to me. The man who had left his son at a rest stop and the woman who had packed his possessions in garbage bags looked so normal, so proud, so loving toward their remaining child. That night, I made a decision. I would succeed not to prove them wrong, not to earn their approval or regret, but for myself. I would build a life so complete they would be irrelevant to it. I enrolled in night classes at the community college while continuing to work full-time. The schedule was brutal: work from 7 in the morning until 4 in the afternoon, classes from 6 to 9 at night, homework until midnight, then up at 5:30 to start again. My first real breakthrough came when I landed a web development contract for a local nonprofit. The project paid enough that I could cut back to part-time at the restaurant. Within a year of being abandoned, I moved to a slightly better apartment, still small, still in a modest neighborhood, but with a separate bedroom and enough space for a proper desk. Looking back at that first year, I'm amazed I survived it. But humans are remarkably adaptable, even to circumstances that seem unbearable. One foot in front of the other, one day at a time, I had begun to build something from the ashes of the life that had been burned down around me. My path forward changed when I met Professor Daniels. I had been doing odd computer repair jobs to supplement my income, and the community college computer lab needed help setting up new equipment. Professor Daniels, who taught advanced programming courses, took notice of how quickly I diagnosed and fixed networking issues. "You have a natural aptitude for this," he said, watching me work. "Are you a student here?" "Just taking a few night classes when I can afford them." He studied me thoughtfully. "Would you be interested in auditing my advanced programming class? No credit, but you'd learn a lot, in exchange for helping maintain the lab." That offer was the first domino in a series of opportunities. With access to the computer lab after hours, I could work on projects without relying on public library computers with strict time limits. Professor Daniels became the mentor I desperately needed, pushing me to learn more, challenging me to solve complex problems. My web design business grew slowly but steadily. I created a portfolio site showcasing my work, focusing on clean design and functionality. Word-of-mouth referrals brought more clients: a local bakery, a law office, a daycare center. Each project improved my skills and expanded my professional network. Professor Daniels encouraged me to apply for a special scholarship program for non-traditional students with demonstrated skill in technology fields. The application required letters of recommendation, a portfolio, and an essay about overcoming obstacles to education. I wrote about financial hardship and family circumstances without detailing the abandonment. Some truths were still too painful to share. When the acceptance letter arrived, offering a full scholarship to complete my degree, I sat on my apartment floor and cried. Not from sadness this time, but from vindication and hope. This was something I had earned entirely on my own merit. With the scholarship covering tuition and providing a small stipend, I moved to a better apartment in a safer neighborhood. It wasn't luxurious, but it had reliable heating, no cockroaches, and neighbors who didn't blast music at 3 in the morning. For the first time since being abandoned, I felt a sense of stability and security. During my first semester back in full-time education, I met Maya and Jason in a database management class. We were assigned to a group project, and their competence and work ethic impressed me. After years of keeping people at a distance, I found myself cautiously opening up to the possibility of real friendship. When I graduated with my bachelor's degree in computer science, Maya and Jason organized a small celebration dinner. It was nothing fancy, just pizza and beer at a local restaurant, but having people who genuinely cared about my achievement meant everything. It was the first time I felt like I belonged somewhere since losing my family. My first real job came through one of Professor Daniels' industry connections, an entry-level position at a promising tech startup developing inventory management systems. The starting salary seemed astronomical compared to what I had been earning, though it was standard for the industry. Still, receiving that first paycheck felt surreal. I advanced quickly, partly due to skill but largely through relentless work ethic. While colleagues complained about tight deadlines or working occasional weekends, I remembered ditch sleeping and park benches. No work challenge could compare to true desperation. 3 years after starting at the company, I bought my first new car, a modest Honda, nothing flashy, but purchased with my own money, in my own name. Driving off the lot, I felt a rush of pride and independence that had nothing to do with impressing others and everything to do with personal achievement. Holidays became less painful as I created new traditions with my chosen family of friends. Thanksgiving at Maya's apartment, with everyone contributing dishes, Christmas Eve movie marathons at Jason's place, New Year's celebrations with colleagues who had become friends. These gatherings lacked the picture-perfect coordination of family holidays, but they were warm, genuine, and free from the underlying tension I now recognized had always pervaded my family celebrations. Occasionally, I would hear updates about my sister through mutual connections. Amber had finished graduate school and taken a job with a marketing firm in Chicago. She had gotten engaged to her college boyfriend. Each piece of news came with a pang of something not quite jealousy, not quite longing, but a bittersweet recognition of a relationship that could have been. When Amber's engagement was announced on social media, several people who knew we were siblings asked if I was excited about the upcoming wedding. I deflected these questions with vague responses about busy work schedules and travel difficulties. The truth that I hadn't spoken to my sister in years and didn't expect an invitation would have led to uncomfortable questions I wasn't prepared to answer. Despite my improving circumstances, I recognized that I needed professional help to address the abandonment trauma. Weekly therapy sessions became part of my routine. My therapist, Dr. Lin, helped me understand that my hypervigilance, trust issues, and fear of rejection stemmed from that fundamental betrayal. What they did says everything about them and nothing about you, she would remind me. You were not abandoned because you were unworthy of love. You were abandoned because they were incapable of providing appropriate parental love and support. At 28, I was promoted to senior developer and then team lead. My responsibilities expanded to include mentoring junior developers, some of whom reminded me of my younger self, eager, somewhat awkward, hungry to learn. I took particular satisfaction in helping those who came from disadvantaged backgrounds or unconventional educational paths. When I turned 30, I bought a small house in a pleasant Denver suburb, nothing extravagant but mine. The day I signed the mortgage papers felt monumental, definitive proof that I had not only survived, but thrived after being discarded. Around this time, I learned through a mutual friend that my parents had been asking about me. Apparently, my father's business had recovered, and they were curious about what had become of their son. The news stirred a complex mix of emotions: anger that they would think they had the right to know about my life, curiosity about their motivations, and a small, unwelcome flutter of validation that they were thinking of me at all. I decided to maintain my distance. Whatever curiosity or remorse they might be feeling didn't erase 12 years of silence, 12 years during which they had made no attempt to find out if I was even alive. As my career solidified, I found purpose beyond professional success. I began volunteering with a program teaching coding to kids from low-income neighborhoods. Seeing their excitement when they created their first program or built their first website brought a joy that promotions and paychecks couldn't match. Dating had always been challenging given my trust issues, but at 31, I met Sophia at a tech conference. She was brilliant, kind, and patient. Our relationship developed slowly, built on mutual respect and honesty. 6 months in, I finally told her the full story of my family and abandonment. We were sitting on my back porch, the summer evening warm around us. I had been vague about my family since we'd started dating, and she deserved the truth. "I don't speak to my family because they abandoned me when I was 20, I said, the words coming out in a rush. They drove me to a rest stop 70 miles from home and left me there with nothing but a backpack. I slept in a drainage ditch that night. I told her everything: the years of struggle, the homelessness, the slow climb back to stability. When I finished, I was shaking, afraid to look at her, afraid to see pity, or worse, disbelief. Instead, when I finally met her eyes, I saw something unexpected: anger on my behalf, and a deep compassion that asked nothing in return. "Thank you for trusting me with that," she said, taking my hand. "What happened to you was wrong, deeply wrong, but look at what you've built from nothing. That's extraordinary, Ray." In that moment, I realized something profound. The story of my abandonment wasn't just a tale of victimhood and survival. It was also a testament to resilience, to the human capacity to rebuild from devastation. For the first time, I felt a flicker of gratitude, not for the abandonment itself, but for the strength I had discovered in its aftermath. I had no idea then that my carefully constructed piece was about to be challenged by a wedding invitation and a handwritten note that would reopen questions I thought I had answered years ago. The envelope arrived on a Tuesday, a cream-colored rectangle with my name and address written in familiar handwriting. I recognized Amber's looping script immediately, though I hadn't seen it in years. The return address showed Chicago, confirming my suspicion about who it was from before I even opened it. Inside was exactly what I expected: a formal invitation to Amber's wedding, scheduled for 6 weeks later in Denver. What I didn't expect was the smaller envelope that fell out along with it, my name written in my mother's unmistakable perfect penmanship. My hands began shaking so badly, I had to set the note down on my kitchen counter. The sight of that handwriting transported me instantly back to that rest stop, to the note taped to garbage bags containing my possessions. The physical reaction was intense: racing heart, shallow breathing, cold sweat breaking out across my forehead. When I had calmed down enough to continue, I opened the smaller envelope with unsteady fingers. The note inside was brief: "We were wrong. We're sorry. Please come." I sat at my kitchen table, staring at those 8 words for what felt like hours, 12 years of silence. And this was all they had to say? A vague acknowledgement of wrongdoing, and an invitation to pretend it had never happened? No explanation, no real apology, just an expectation that I would come running back at their summons. My phone rang that evening, an unknown Chicago number. I almost didn't answer, but some instinct told me who it might be. "Ray? It's Amber." Her voice sounded exactly the same, perhaps a bit more mature, but still recognizably my little sister. "I got your invitation," I said, trying to keep my voice neutral. "And the note. I know it's a lot to take in, and I know things ended badly." "Ended badly? That's how you characterize abandonment?" "They left me at a rest stop, Amber. They changed the locks. They told people I chose to leave." A long pause. "I know. And they were wrong. They know that now. 12 years later, they've had a change of heart?" "It's been a long process," she said carefully. "They've been asking about you for years, actually. Since about 5 years ago, when Dad's business really turned around. Mom, especially. She's not the same person she was back then. Why should I care? Why should I believe anything they say?" "You shouldn't," she said, surprising me. "You have every right to tell all of us to go to hell. But I'm getting married, Ray, and despite everything, you're my brother. I'd like you to be there." She went on to explain that our parents had experienced a significant reversal of fortune after I'd been gone about 3 years. My father's business had landed several major contracts, and their financial situation had improved dramatically. With that pressure removed, they had apparently begun to question their actions. "Mom started seeing a therapist after her anxiety got really bad," Amber explained. "That's when things started to change. She began to understand what they had done to you." "And Dad?" He's still Dad. Stubborn, difficult to read, but he asks about you. Keeps newspaper clippings when your company is mentioned in business articles." The idea that my father had been tracking my career was both unsettling and strangely affecting. I had worked so hard to convince myself that I didn't care what they thought, that their opinion had no power over me. Yet here I was, feeling a complex emotion at the thought of my father collecting evidence of my success. "I can't just pretend nothing happened, Amber. I can't play happy reunion at your wedding. I'm not asking you to. I'm just asking you to consider coming. For me, yes, but also maybe for yourself. For closure, if nothing else." After we hung up, I called my therapist and scheduled an emergency session. Dr. Lin listened as I poured out the conflicted emotions the invitation had triggered. "What are you afraid would happen if you went?" she asked. "That they'd hurt me again. That I'd let them. And what are you afraid would happen if you didn't go?" That question was harder to answer. That I'd always wonder. That I'd regret not seeing for myself what they had to say. In the following days, I discussed the situation with my closest friends. Maya was firmly in the tell them to go to hell camp. "They don't deserve your forgiveness," she insisted. Jason was more measured, suggesting I could attend purely on my own terms. "You've built a life they have no part in. You have all the power now." Sophia, as always, provided the most balanced perspective. "Whatever you decide, I'll support you. But remember, forgiveness isn't about them. It's about freeing yourself from carrying the weight of what they did." The wedding invitation arrived at a time when I thought I had finally healed from my past, but it quickly became clear how much power those old wounds still held. Nightmares I hadn't experienced in years returned, dreams of being lost, of calling for help with no response, of searching empty houses for a family that had vanished. I spent hours researching family estrangement and reconciliation. The stories I found were mixed, some beautiful reunions, some disastrous attempts that only deepened the original wounds. There was no clear roadmap for navigating this territory. That's actually exactly what happened. I created a detailed pros and cons list about attending the wedding, trying to approach the decision analytically, since my emotions were too turbulent to be trusted. On the pro side, supporting Amber, gaining closure, satisfying my own curiosity, demonstrating my success. On the con side, potential emotional devastation, reopening healed wounds, giving them access to my life they hadn't earned. Amber called again a week later to check if I had made a decision. During our conversation, she revealed more about our family's version of events after my departure. "They told everyone we'd lost touch when you moved away for work," she explained. "It started as the lie they told immediately after what happened. But over time, I think they started believing it themselves. It was easier than admitting what they'd done. She also shared news that hit me hard. Our grandfather had passed away 3 years earlier. I hadn't known. No one had thought to tell me, or perhaps they hadn't known how to reach me. "There are people in the family who miss you," Amber said. "Aunt Laura asks about you every Christmas. Cousin Michael named his son after you." One evening, I sat down and wrote a letter I had no intention of sending, pouring out 12 years of anger, pain, confusion, and grief. I wrote about the night in the drainage ditch, about the humiliation of homeless shelters, about holidays spent alone while they celebrated with Amber. I wrote until my hand cramped and tears blurred my vision. Then I burned the letter in my backyard fire pit, watching the ashes rise into the night sky. The pressure increased when Amber mentioned that several relatives had been told I might attend. Great Aunt Edith says at 87, she might not have another chance to see you. I'm sorry if that feels like manipulation. I'm just telling you what's happening on this end. After nearly a week of deliberation, the moment of clarity I needed came unexpectedly. I was driving home from work, stuck in traffic, half listening to a podcast, when the thought crystallized. I could attend this wedding on my terms. I didn't have to seek their approval or forgiveness. I didn't have to pretend everything was fine. I could go for my own closure, to look them in the eye as an adult who had survived their worst moment. That evening I called Amber and told her I would attend, with conditions. I would bring Sophia as my +1. I would not participate in family photos beyond one with Amber if she wanted it. I would stay at a hotel, not with family. And I would leave if things became too difficult. "That's fair," she said, relief evident in her voice. "More than fair." I spent the weeks before the wedding preparing both emotionally and practically. I worked with Dr. Lin on coping strategies for triggering situations. Sophia and I shopped for appropriate attire. I wanted to look successful without appearing like I was trying to prove anything. I rehearsed simple, neutral responses to the inevitable questions from relatives. "What have you been doing all these years?" "I work in software development." "How about you?" "Why haven't we seen you at family gatherings?" "Work keeps me busy." "Tell me about your children." I booked a hotel room far enough from the wedding venue that I wouldn't accidentally encounter family members, but close enough that transportation wouldn't be an issue. I arranged for a rental car so we'd have our own means of escape if needed. The night before we left for Denver, I had my final therapy session before the trip. Dr. Lin reminded me of how far I had come. 12 years ago, they held all the power. Tomorrow, you meet them as equals, actually. More than equals. You've built something they tried to prevent. Remember that. As Sophia and I packed for the trip, I felt a strange mix of dread and anticipation. Whatever happened at this wedding, it would be a turning point. After 12 years of silence, I was about to face the people who had thrown me away, not as the desperate, abandoned 20-year-old I had been, but as the successful, self-sufficient man I had become despite them. "Are you ready for this?" Sophia asked as we loaded our suitcases into the car. "No," I admitted, "but I'm going anyway." The drive back to my hometown felt like traveling through time. Landmarks I hadn't seen in 12 years appeared both changed and hauntingly familiar. The suburb where I grew up had expanded, with new developments sprawling into what had once been open fields. The mall where I had worked had been renovated, barely recognizable except for its general outline. We checked into our hotel, a mid-range chain where I'd booked a standard room. Nothing flashy, but comfortable and neutral territory. The wedding wasn't until the next day, but the rehearsal dinner was that evening. Amber had invited me, though she'd understood completely when I declined, promising to see her at the ceremony instead. That decision was tested when Sophia and I entered the hotel restaurant for dinner and came face to face with my parents in the lobby. They had aged, of course. My father's dark hair was now mostly gray, his tall frame slightly stooped. My mother looked thinner than I remembered, lines around her eyes and mouth that hadn't been there before. For a moment, we all froze, a tableau of mutual shock despite knowing we were in the same city for the same event. They seemed smaller somehow, less intimidating than in my memories. My father's expression registered surprise, then something like shame before settling into an unreadable mask. My mother's eyes filled with tears. "Ray," she said, taking a half step forward before stopping herself. "You came." "For Amber," I replied, my voice steadier than I expected. Sophia squeezed my hand, a silent reminder of her support. I introduced her briefly, not wanting to extend this unexpected encounter. "We're just heading to dinner," I said. "We can talk tomorrow at the wedding." My father nodded, seeming relieved at the reprieve. "We're glad you're here, son," he said, the word son landing strangely in the space between us. In the restaurant, safely seated at a table far from the lobby, Sophia studied my face. "You handled that well." "It didn't feel real," I admitted, like I was watching someone else talk to them. The wedding was being held at a country club on the outskirts of town. We arrived precisely on time, slipping into seats at the back just as the music started. I caught glimpses of familiar faces, aunts, uncles, cousins I hadn't seen in over a decade, but focused on the ceremony itself. Amber looked beautiful, radiantly happy in a way I hadn't seen since we were children. Her fiancé, now husband, gazed at her with genuine adoration during their vows. Whatever else had happened, my sister had found someone who truly loved her. At the reception, Amber found me immediately, hugging me with surprising strength. "You came. You really came." I said I would. "I know. But, thank you." She turned to include Sophia. "Both of you. This means everything to me." The inevitable reunion with extended family followed. Some were awkward, clearly having believed whatever story my parents had told about my absence. Others were genuinely warm, especially Aunt Laura, who held onto my hands and studied my face as if memorizing it. "You look so much like your grandfather," she said. "He would have been proud of the man you've become." I was midway through a conversation with one of my cousins when my father approached, asking if we could speak privately. We stepped out onto the venue's terrace, the spring evening pleasantly cool. "I've rehearsed this conversation 1,000 times," he began, "and none of it seems adequate now." "It's been 12 years, I said. "That's a long time to rehearse." He acknowledged this with a nod. "I won't make excuses for what we did. It was wrong, unforgivably wrong. Yet here you are, seeking forgiveness. Not seeking it, not expecting it, just acknowledging the wrong." Finally, he explained, as Amber had, about the financial troubles that had pushed him to the breaking point. The construction company had been weeks away from bankruptcy. The house had been mortgaged to the limit. My mother's family had been supporting them secretly, with terms that came with shame and resentment. "We were drowning," he said, "and instead of reaching out for help, I took it out on you. Made you the problem so I didn't have to face my own failures." The honesty was unexpected. I had anticipated defensiveness, perhaps a sanitized version of events. Instead, he was offering context without using it as an excuse. "Do you know what happened to me afterward?" I asked. "Do you have any idea what those first years were like?" He looked down. "Amber told us some. Not right away. Later, when things had stabilized, she said you were homeless for a while." I slept in parks, in shelters when I could get a bed. I worked multiple minimum wage jobs, and still barely made rent in a place with drug dealers for neighbors. "I'm sorry, Ray. It doesn't change anything, but I am truly sorry." The wedding reception continued inside, the sounds of celebration creating a strange backdrop for this sober conversation. I studied my father's face, searching for the man who had been capable of abandoning his son. He was there, in the stubborn set of the jaw, but there was something else too, a weariness, perhaps wisdom, that hadn't existed before. "I don't forgive you," I said finally. "I can't. Not yet, maybe not ever, but I can acknowledge that you're trying now. That's something." He nodded, accepting this without protest. "It's more than I deserve." The following morning, my mother asked to meet me for coffee at a shop near our hotel. Sophia offered to come, but I felt I needed to do this alone. My mother was already there when I arrived, sitting at a corner table with 2 cups in front of her. "I remembered you like it black," she said as I sat down. "I take cream now," I replied. A small thing, but a reminder of the years and changes she had missed. Unlike my father, who had been surprisingly direct, my mother circled the main topic, asking about my work, my home, whether Sophia and I had been together long. I answered minimally, waiting for her to reach the point. Finally, she set down her cup. "I let you down in the worst possible way," she said. "A mother is supposed to protect her child, and I not only failed to protect you, I participated in hurting you." She had been seeing a therapist for years, she explained. The abandonment had been a breaking point for her as well, triggering a mental health crisis in the months that followed. "I told myself we were teaching you independence, helping you become a man, but those were lies to ease my conscience." The rehearsed quality of her words suggested therapeutic talking points, but the emotion behind them seemed genuine. "I know words mean nothing after what we did. I just needed you to hear that I know it was wrong. Deeply, unforgivably wrong." "Why now?" I asked. "It's been 12 years. Why reach out now?" "We've been trying to find you for years," she said. "You changed your name?" I nodded. I had legally changed my last name about 5 years after being abandoned, partly for professional reasons, but largely to sever one more tie to the family that had rejected me. "Amber only told us where you were when the wedding was being planned. She made us promise not to contact you directly, that she would be the intermediary." She looked down at her hands. "I write you letters, you know. Letters I never sent because I didn't know where to send them." I wasn't sure I believed this. It seemed too convenient, too exculpatory. "You could have found me if you'd really tried. Social media, mutual connections, professional directories." "You're right," she admitted. "The truth is, for a long time, we were too ashamed. And then, when we did start looking, it felt too late. What could we possibly say, after so much time? What right did we have to disrupt the life you'd built without us?" There was some truth to this that resonated with me. What right indeed? Yet here they were, disrupting nonetheless. As we parted, she touched my arm hesitantly. "We're not asking to be your parents again. That right was forfeited. But perhaps, someday, we could know you as the man you've become, on whatever terms you set." The remainder of the wedding weekend passed in a blur of cautious interactions. I agreed to be in one family photo with Amber, standing at the edge of the group, Sophia beside me like an anchor to my real life. I exchanged contact information with a few relatives I had genuinely missed. I danced with my sister at her reception, both of us teary-eyed for different reasons. I maintained emotional distance throughout, particularly with my parents. No dramatic reconciliation, no tearful embraces, just civil conversations and tentative steps toward whatever this new relationship might become. We left immediately after the reception, driving back to our hotel to pack for an early morning flight. As we passed through my old neighborhood, I asked Sophia to stop outside my childhood home. I sat in the car, looking at the house where I had grown up. The paint color had changed. The maple tree in the front yard had grown massive. Someone else's life was happening inside those walls now. "Do you want to go knock?" Sophia asked. "Your parents mentioned they still live there." I shook my head. "No. This isn't about going back. It's about acknowledging where I came from without being defined by it." In the weeks since returning home, I've had one phone call with Amber and exchanged a few text messages with my mother. My father sent an email with some old family photos he thought I might want. Small, tentative connections, carefully managed on my terms. I don't know what this relationship will become. I'm not sure I want a close connection with the people who were capable of such cruelty, regardless of how they might have changed. But I've discovered that maintaining rigid boundaries isn't the same as harboring hatred. I can allow limited contact while protecting the life and self I've built. The most valuable lesson from this experience isn't about forgiveness or reconciliation. It's about standing firm in your own worth. My parents' greatest crime wasn't abandoning me physically. It was trying to make me believe I had no value beyond what I could provide for them. Proving them wrong wasn't about financial success or career achievements, but about building a life rich in meaning, connection, and integrity. Their loss was immeasurable. They missed, knowing the remarkable man their son became, not because of their actions, but despite them. The strength I discovered in myself during those darkest days has become the foundation upon which I've built everything else. If you're watching this and have experienced abandonment or rejection from those who should have loved you most, know this. Your worth isn't determined by those who couldn't see it. The family you choose, friends, partners, mentors, can provide the support and love your biological family failed to give. And sometimes, the greatest achievement is simply surviving, standing tall in the knowledge that you made it through what was meant to break you. I'd love to hear your stories of resilience and rebuilding in the comments below. Have you reconciled with estranged family or found peace in maintaining distance? Whatever your path, please know you're not alone. Subscribe if you'd like to hear more stories of overcoming adversity, and share this video with someone who might need to hear that abandonment isn't the end of their story, but possibly the beginning of a stronger one. Thank you for listening, and remember you are worthy of love, regardless of who failed to show it.